Hello and welcome to the United Federation of Reddit podcast. I'm your host, Big J76.
And I'm Yazman, a co-host.
And I'm Rob, and it's 55 degrees outside.
I'm Smash, and we'll be discussing the Reddit Star Trek community in 2018.
That's right. And there's been a lot of stuff that's happened this year.
What would you say is the biggest? What is the one thing that has had Reddit just talking all year?
I think Discovery season 2 probably, but I mean the Picard show. I mean, there's a show about Picard, and everybody has a big hard on for Picard for obvious reasons, and
obvious reasons.
Definitely the Picard series, I think so too.
Non-stop chatter all year about that,
and all over Reddit, not just in the Star Trek subs. This is where you see Discovery stuff, and sci-fi and television and general media subs on Reddit that have lots and huge amounts of subscribers. You have a lot of hype for this Picard to come back.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, now Star Trek Discovery ended the first season early in 2018. And in between the first season and the second season, there was the announcement of the short treks that we were going to get kind of as a filler.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think was very interesting about 2018, especially in United Federation of Reddit member sub r/Star Trek Discovery, there's constant discussion, news, speculations. There were people on both sides of the aisle, liked it, disliked it in regards to that first season and the turn that it took in the mirror universe.
I think something I noticed in terms of the community and Discovery is that sort of regardless of what people thought about it, it definitely had a big impact on like the growth of the community. Around the time Discovery came out, which was like November last year.
About right.
I'd noticed, I was a moderator in a large Star Trek Discord community at the time. And well, it was small then. And then Discovery came out, and it's, in terms of size, that Discord server has, while I was there, it had quadrupled in the course of a couple of months. And I believe since then it has, it's much larger than it was then. So it's definitely, and I've seen subreddits expand significantly since then as well. I mean, we have entirely new subreddits that have just popped up out of nowhere. Like obviously r/Star Trek Discovery has something like 14K subs now.
Everyone wants their piece of the Discovery news.
Yeah, I thought that.
Sorry, go ahead, Zato.
Oh, hey, yeah. I thought that people were really excited at first, but then it had that mid-season break around the holidays. So like around this time of year, it was off air for a couple of weeks. And on Technobabble, we have an automated auto-moderator posts a weekly discussion thread for the new episodes. I think that first episode back, the discussion was like, hey, man, I forgot this was even a thing. Still, I thought it finished. I didn't even know it was still airing. Kind of comments.
So the general thought of the community was that they forgot about Discovery?
Yeah, during its mid-season break. I'd be really interested to see what Paramount subscription. Yeah, the mid-season break.
I'd really
be interested to see what Paramount subscriptions ended up doing.
Time-honored tradition in screwing over the viewers of a TV series. I'll never forgive them when they were doing it, like whenever they've done that with Doctor Who. But
don't even get me started on Doctor Who, man. We can go on a whole other podcast for that.
Mid-season breaks, right? Like, yeah, I think they do have definitely an effect of creating a bit of downtime, and people kind of cognitively move on because they feel like the show is over, and then it comes back. Yeah. And it's never really publicized that well when the season resumes. I think something they've done well this year in terms of content and keeping people talking about was the short treks.
Yeah, when it comes to the mid-season breaks, I prefer them because it kind of cuts up the season, and it feels like you get it for longer. And I definitely don't forget about it. And when it's not airing anymore, there's all the speculation. You can, discuss what's going to be possibly happening. So I might be in the minority of that, but I don't mind those. But the short treks are interesting in how they're bridging that gap to the next season.
Tell us a little bit more about those. What are they? For anybody who hasn't watched them.
The short treks, I will have to tell you, I was okay with the first one. The Tilly short trek episode was okay. I was not too impressed with Calypso, the one that was kind of took place far into the future type episode. I know there were a few folks in the Reddit community that actually liked that one. To me, I just remembered when I was seeing previews about that one, it didn't strike me as this is going to be interesting. And when I watched it, that was more or less confirmed, at least in my opinion.
Sure.
I liked the episode, the short trek that centered around Saru, because it really told a lot about his people and just how he came to be in Starfleet. And that was a conversation I had with with another Trek fan was, well, how is it possible that this race was able to meet the requirements for first contact with the Federation, to have this person in Starfleet, because they are a species that's preyed upon. And to me, it seemed like, well, how do you get to the point where you are able to develop warp travel to be contacted by the Federation, not break the Prime Directive when you're in a position like that? And it made a lot of sense. It answered a lot of questions that basically...
They had a pretty good little solution to that too, yeah.
It was a great solution. It was, because the answer was, well, no, they didn't. They didn't develop the technology. There was a loophole that they were able to contact this one person, because this one individual was able to take and engineer alien technology to contact them. And I thought, okay, yes, that makes sense.
Saru definitely seems to be a bit of a fan favorite, I noticed too. Like, everybody seems to like him. He seems to be one of the more popular characters. I think give it a couple of seasons and I think if they play it right, he could end up being a pretty beloved character in the end.
I think so. I think he'll definitely be a good character, and that's going to be the thing is the community is already charged up and ready for season 2, and there's a lot of positives there. So that's kind of the big thing is Discovery has seemed to sort of be the driving force in 2018 on the Reddit community, whether good or bad. But I've got to tell you, with the announcement of the Picard series at the Star Trek Las Vegas convention, now let's take some time to talk about that one.
Sure.
I'll be curious to see what kind of, everybody's hyped for it. I'll be curious to see what kind of impact it has in terms of, because one thing I notice, I often notice with some regularity on Discord servers that are sort of related to some of these subreddits, and also just on some of the subreddits, more often a lot of sort of relatively new fans, people who just sort of started watching on Netflix. I'll be curious to see if the Picard series can do that, or if it'll be more of a thing for the hardcore fans. I'll be very curious to see how they go with that.
I think there's a lot of teenagers who have grown up watching The Next Generation with their parents, and they're getting more involved with it because there will be a new show. So hopefully they do cater to some of the younger audiences too.
It definitely seems to be. Sorry, go ahead, Zado.
I think it'll be a mix of both, because you're going to have people coming from the nostalgia, but they're also going to be trying to create a new audience for these characters.
Can you imagine the pressure they have to get it perfect?
I can, and they better, gosh darn it.
Yes, I agree. What would you guys like to see in the show?
Oh, I definitely want to see something that resolves the B4 Commander Data issue that was brought up in Nemesis.
I think for me personally, this might be a little bit of heresy. I mean, I do actually completely agree with what Zadok just said, though. I think they need to resolve that somehow. But I personally would like to see it be something new. You know what I mean? For me, I don't want to see I don't want to see too many cameos. I think Data needs to be in it. I think that needs to be resolved.
And that's as far as I go.
Yeah, like I don't want to see them shoehorning in every man and his, like all these characters. I mean, even if they don't have, like they might not even. I would be happy if they didn't even have Riker in it. I could still see it being a fantastic series.
I don't even think there's a need for Riker to be in front of the camera for this series.
Exactly. Yeah,
but I can see like if they go to Kronos, why wouldn't Worf hook up for a couple episodes? So I mean, depending on what the plot goes, and we're getting ahead of ourselves because what's the show about, guys?
Yeah, he might not even be. I mean,
he might not even still be in Starfleet. He could be retired.
Yeah, well, I noticed like the general. If you look at the general sort of gist of a lot of things that of post TNG lore, they seem to often say that Picard has become an ambassador, so that it might not even be about. And I'm not saying they'll go in that direction, but yeah, it might not even be. He might not even be a ship captain.
He might not even be in Starfleet. He could be retired by the time this show starts.
I'd be totally in favor of just some bizarre thing, Picard off doing archaeology somewhere. I don't fucking know, but
dude, as long as they get the character right, I'm cool.
Yeah, well, Picard is he's such a cerebral character, and there's so much you can do with him. I mean, everybody loves the Inner Light, and it's not really, in terms of its format, a traditional Star Trek episode, in my opinion. It's mostly just Picard with his family, and
I think it was a true, and I think that's what makes it such a standout episode.
This is something that I thought was very telling when the announcement was done, and if you see the top scoring post this year on Reddit for r/Star Trek is the announcement of the new Star Trek series with Patrick Stewart. And I watched the video, and when I saw this post and then watched the video for the discussion, sitting there watching this happen, I can only imagine what it would have been like to be there, to see him come out, Patrick Stewart. And I'm watching this, and this post that I'm talking about, that I'm referencing, of course, big discussion. It's got over 3,000 comments. So you make a comment in there that day, it was getting buried, But of course, everyone was excited about it. And I think what was very big about that announcement was it seemed like it brought, for a brief moment, it brought everyone back together. I don't believe, and I'm scrolling through here, and it is as much, not hate, for lack of a better word, maybe some dislike that the Reddit community has given to Discovery. You will be hard pressed to find a lot of negativity in that announcement, in that post. It seemed like for that moment, everybody was brought back together in the Reddit Star Trek community.
There's a comment on here that says that they're excited that it'll be about the future instead of like a prequel. And I think that's really a great contrast to the Discovery series, is having something in the future completely different from Discovery, and something that they can build upon of a series that we already love and characters we already know.
Yeah, I feel like they put Discovery in the time frame they put it in so it can overlap with the Kirk timeline. And obviously, with season 2, they're going that original series direction. But Star Trek's about humanity looking to the future. And it should always, I feel like, they did Enterprise, how we got there. That was cool. We don't need to see that part of the past again. Star Trek should be future edge.
I think the thing is, with a lot of these shows that they're doing now, if you look at the types of angles that they're all going for, you've got the Picard show, it's about him and it's 20 years after. You've got Discovery in its own little time period. you've also got Lower Decks, which has been announced this year, and that's something completely different itself. And there's been talk of a Star Trek Academy series, which again is totally different. I mean, it seems like they're going for a diversity of shows, but each one of those shows has its own unique setting. And I actually think that that's probably a better direction to go in, really, than what they did in. Not that I'm complaining about Deep Space Nine and Voyager and that, but they're both great shows. But they were all kind of the same period. They were very similar in terms of setting. Like what I see, what we're getting, from what was announced this year, is a significant amount of shows which are all in totally different settings. I think that seems to be what they're going for.
Yeah, and I think that the different settings is really good, and they kind of did that in the 90s, because Next Gen ends and Deep Space Nine's on a spaceship, and Voyager's off on its own with new aliens that you've never seen before. So they kind of did do a neat job of having their own setting, even though they were using all the same time period. I just wanted to give some credit to those guys for that, but I totally agree with the point. What I think that Paramount are doing is they're trying to reverse engineer a streaming service. So they're not trying to necessarily expand their audience. They're just trying to give the Star Trek audience that they've already captured more food to chew on, because the longer you watch, the more valuable.
You mean CBS, right?
Their streaming services, CBS,
yeah.
Which is owned by
Paramount. Does the movies?
Oh yes. Sorry, my bad. CBS. So CBS All Access is what I'm talking about. Let me just go back to the beginning on that one. Yeah. So they're trying to reverse engineer a streaming service, and I think what they're trying to do is give content to users they already have.
Well, and it's going to be, with all these different shows that are being announced, is going to be a way to. Everyone's doing a streaming service now, and I think that is the thing that helped create some of this. Amongst the Reddit community, there was just a lot of dislike in regards to CBS and using Star Trek as a way to bring in subscribers for yet another streaming service that only had one show. And then they're start throwing in these short treks. So, and everyone wants to do their own streaming service, and I understand that, but that's the kind of thing that I don't think that the fandom really needed. They didn't need this franchise, because we've talked about Star Trek being taken seriously by the fans, and I really think that the CBS All Access thing was just kind of a sticking a middle finger up to the fan base, saying, well, now you need to pay for it on our exclusive streaming service to see your show.
Sure. I think it's not even. Go ahead. I'll go
I was going to say, let's be fair to them here to some extent. I can see your point about giving the finger to fans, but let's be fair to them. The only fans they're giving the finger to are American fans. The rest of us just watch it on Netflix.
Yes.
Ouch, burn.
Yeah.
That hurts. I am wounded.
Okay.
I'm getting looked after here.
Fair point. But obviously they have a huge market share in the United States, and this is a huge franchise for not just CBS, but also Paramount, and everyone else who has a piece of the licensing deal of Star Trek, which is several companies. The thing is, it's also kind of a middle finger, not just to the fan base of the news show, but to the franchise itself. The franchise should be a flagship franchise for a network. Well, it shouldn't be kind of hidden. And I get it's a flagship for CBS All Access. But here's a streaming service that nobody asked for and no one needs.
Yeah, I think it's the whole thing of...
It exists. Everything's on there. So I'm not going to complain about it anymore, but I just see where Big J is coming from.
I think the whole problem is that, and I think it's a 2018 thing in general, is that there's just this abundance of streaming services now. And I think I understand that companies want to take a higher proportion of profit, but if everybody has their own streaming service, then I think that all that happens is fans are less likely to want to pay for things that they are consuming.
I think you're right. I mean,
I've seen Yeah, I mean, I've seen in if you take with computer games, for example, there's so many digital storefronts now. I've seen an uptick in people torrenting games again. And I'm not necessarily endorsing that, but I'm just making the point that if every single company has its own, streaming service or platform, people don't
Nobody
want.
does.
Yeah, nobody wants 50 different streaming services all charging $10 a month.
That's why we cut the cord with cable.
Yeah. Well,
why
that's
we did
exactly.
that.
It just sort of brings us all back to the 90s again, which it kind of defeats the whole point of it being digital in the first place.
Yeah, and I think that you can still get away with having, Hulu, Netflix, or maybe Hulu, Netflix, Amazon, or maybe Hulu, Amazon, or whatever your combo is of your favorite top 3 networks. And then maybe 1 or 2 premium ones, like Disney's coming out with a premium. We know that. And HBO's had a pretty decent streaming premium service for a while now that you get for free if you subscribe to HBO anyway. Or you can subscribe just for the streaming service. So that makes sense since they already had a subscription model. I think there's room for the big 3 plus each consumer to have 1 or 2 premiums, if any, 0 to 2 premiums. Let's say that.
The thing that'll be interesting to see will be international. I mean, obviously they're going to put all this stuff on CBS All Access, but I'll be curious to see internationally. Where is the Picard show? Are they all going to be on Netflix again?
Probably.
Or are they going to try to launch? Because I've heard rumors that they're going to try to launch CBS All Access in Australia here, which is a nightmare for me.
It's a bummer.
But I'll be curious to see where they put all these other shows. I mean, are we going to have French people having to sign up to the CBS All Access?
It's a good question.
But something you mentioned that I think is worth pointing out that happened this year, that I think there was tons of discussion about, and it was very controversial. I actually would argue. I mean, personally, I didn't think this needs to be a controversy, but I actually think it's probably the most controversial thing that happened in the Star Trek fandom this year was with the movies that Paramount announced. They confirmed that there's 2 movies in production. One of them is another Kelvin movie, and the other one is a Quentin Tarantino Star Trek, and that was way more controversial than I expected it to be. I heard that news and I thought, this is going to be great. It's somebody like Tarantino that wants to work on Star Trek, and I did not expect it to be as, like, the community was very divided on that. On a lot of subreddits I saw, there was a lot of really, really big debate about that.
I agree. I think a lot of people are excited for, the new movies, but also a little apprehensive about, what the 2 directions could go.
Well, I think it could be great. I think it could be awful. It's going to be somewhere in between. It's either going to be great or, some varying degree going all the way down the scale. But I think there's nothing to be upset about until we have anything to see. And so I'm excited and I'm hopeful for that first trailer.
It's interesting to me that they didn't announce. They just announced that these 2 movies exist. They didn't. All we know about the Tarantino movie is that it exists, and it's not even confirmed.
Are they still doing that?
Yeah, it's happening, and it's not even confirmed if it's going to be a Kelvin movie. So it might not even. I mean, it could be anything.
Well, they don't want to pay Chris Pine his contract to reprise the role. They want him to take a pay cut, which I believe is unfair, that Beyond didn't perform the way that they wanted it to, and that they're going to ask the actors to take a pay cut to cover for their costs, which, I mean, that could be a whole other discussion there, but that's the thing that we're talking about in regards to the input you see on the Reddit fandom is CBS and Paramount. One, they're not working together. They're trying to stay separate. Everyone seems to be wanting to jump on the whole Marvel cinematic universe thing, and how the movies and the shows, at least at a time, were tied in. The shows have more or less separated out even further, but DC's trying to do the same thing, and I think Star Trek has the potential to do that. However, you've got Paramount that's got the movie rights. CBS has the TV series. Neither one wants to interact with the other, and you're going after this cash grab here, where there's not a cohesive plan.
Well, I think J.J. Abrams' original plan was to do a expanded universe type of thing with Kelvin. I recall him saying, it wasn't this year, but I believe it was a couple of years ago. But he said that he had originally wanted to do a TV series to go along with it, and that didn't happen because of the nightmarish licensing that is Star Trek. So we could have had something like that, but because they are trying to be so separate, I think it's
unfortunate that it didn't materialize.
Well, I think it's okay to have some separation. Like, if this Tarantino movie becomes a real thing and an actual movie, I think it would be better for it to be standalone, to be honest.
Yeah, of course.
I think it would be good to have more flavors of Star Trek out there for their mainstream public to consume in the movies.
I think something that's relevant to point out as well, at least from a fan's perspective, my opinion is that the movies are never as good as the series anyway. So if the movie sucks and it's not tied into a series, then it doesn't really affect the show.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Kelvin movies, to be honest, either.
Really?
I mean more the movies in general.
Really?
I mean, if you look at even the TNG movies weren't, at least in my opinion, weren't that great. Like, like the original series as a series is, I still think, in my opinion, way better than the movies were. I think the one constant to me as a Star Trek fan is that the series are always way better than the movies.
Well, we'll find out if that remains true now that they're totally independent of each other.
Smash, you got to get us into a topic that is happier. I think all the CBS talk and the Kelvin timeline debacle of movies is getting us down.
What do you think about Lower Decks, Smash?
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what they're going to do with that. But when it comes to the next topic, you wanted something uplifting, but I really wanted to discuss how the Reddit community came together for Hawking. Hawking passed away this year. The second highest, upvoted post in our Star Trek is, the post that he passed away, and the whole community came together for that, which is pretty inspiring.
He was pretty, I think he was the only person that has ever been in Star Trek that played himself.
I believe you're right. I am hard pressed to think of.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's the only person ever in Star Trek to play himself in the show. I think somebody like Stephen Hawking, he was known to be a Star Trek fan, and I think in his own way he would have had his own influence on the show. Being, of course, the exact type of person that typically is both inspires and is inspired by a show like Star Trek.
I think that was a great post, and that was something that the community could definitely come together on. And he was a big influence on not just Star Trek, but in science fiction in general. And just with the kind of things that we could do.
And I think it's interesting. Like a lot of the stuff that he spent talking to the public about in some of his last years was about AI, and so which is of course a topic that isn't that is only sometimes touched on in Star Trek. Obviously, Data and the hologram are the most obvious examples of that. But he had spent a lot of time warning about the potential dangers of it. So it's interesting. The community seemed to have a really positive response. There were, as Smash pointed out, you pointed out that it was the second most upvoted post, I think you said.
Right. I mean, we're talking hundreds of comments. I think there's like over 300 comments of just people coming together, sharing their experiences, talking about like how hawking has influenced their life, and all.
There's some good comments in there too. There's a comment where a user called Mr. Valdez said that that Hawking toured a Star Trek set, and when he saw the warp core, he said, "I'm working on that."
Yes, that was a great story. I remember that story. In true Reddit fashion, you cannot have any post, no matter how uplifting, without someone down at the bottom. You know, there's always a negative Nancy, unfortunately, and you know that's something that I think is another interesting point is. And I want to get all of your opinions on this. The Star Trek community on Reddit, is it possible to make everyone happy?
No, it definitely can't keep everyone happy. I mean, the fans themselves are even so polarizing. You have people who are really hoping for fan service on the new Picard series, and you have people who want something completely fresh and new too. So
I think we can have both. What do you want?
For the Picard series?
Yeah.
Oh God, that's a lot of pressure. I have no expectations. I will be happy with whatever comes out as long as it's got has new ships in it. I think that's something I would like. Just new technology, seeing how they build their characters and what's happened to them since then.
I'm with you on that.
One of the things that I think I will take a moment to talk about that was a big plus for one of the United Federation of Reddit members was r/Star Trek gifts. Now, this may not be a big deal to some, but we had a post where we got a response from William Shatner.
That's true. He did stop by.
William Shatner himself did stop by. So if you haven't seen that, please visit r/Star Trek gifts. Do a search.
Do you want to tell us a bit more about that post, Big J?
Yes, I will. So really, the post itself, and I'm going to have to go back. I was literally in the midst of pulling that up as you were talking about that.
Right.
So there was a post several months ago, and in that post, it was a GIF. It was a GIF from one of the Saturday Night Live sketches. And in this sketch, it was William Shatner. This was, I want to say, late 80s, early 90s. I believe this was around Star Trek V time. And it was about Kirk was shaming the Sulu, the actor playing Sulu, about getting a little bigger, putting on a little weight, standing there at the salad bar. And so one of our users pointed out that William Shatner is a Redditor. And several weeks later, it took a couple weeks, but a couple weeks later, we're getting messages on Discord from this user that he got a response from William Shatner that just simply said, "Leave Dogface alone."
And it was various extinctions. Who's a pretty prolific giffer on that subreddit who made
absolutely
that, got the response from Shatner, which is pretty amazing.
How cool is that? Am I the only one that thinks that William Shatner coming to the subreddit for any response? Now, granted, typically when it comes to the sci-fi subreddits, you've got r/Star Trek. He'll troll sometimes in the Star Wars sub,
right.
which is great. But in r/Star Trek gifts, I would have to say that was big. We did have Will Wheaton actually came in and made a comment at one point in there as well. So, and also a Redditor. So we've had Will Wheaton make a comment there on a post, and William Shatner. So to me, that made my year. That made my year in 2018, and also in Star Trek gifts. It's very talented users there taking these scenes from Star Trek, from the TV series, the movies, very creative captions on these gifs that are happening, and very funny stuff. I would certainly encourage any of you who haven't seen it or haven't looked at it, even check out the GIF battles. That is one of the things.
Battles.
Yeah, there's been some good content.
Tell us about those.
So one of the things that we wanted to do there in the as part of the community building was, and we started doing this in 2018, was doing. I'm sorry. We started doing it in 2017. Carried over into this year was the gift battles, and basically it's just a very open thing where users can submit gifts that will have certain themes to do battle with each other, and who gets the most upvotes wins. So we've been doing that, and I apologize, the first one was August 2018, so that was a 2018 thing that we started. Just something to get the community together, something to bring the Star Trek community together on Reddit, to give them something fun to do and something fun to look at. We had a tournament in 2018, a gift tournament, which went very well. And we decided that, well, let's do something on a little bit smaller scale each month. And that's just a community building thing, to do that, to give people something to do, something to talk about.
Right. Well, as a fan of Star Trek gifts, it is so much fun to see how people can take your theme. What was the last one? Was Marvel, right?
The last theme, it was Marvel.
And just to see how everyone applied Marvel to Star Trek is just genius. And the amount of work that goes into creating these gifts and the thought, it's really nice. I think that's something really cool about 2018 on Reddit, Star Trek.
Subreddit had some great content in 2018 was r/Shitty Daystrom Institute.
Oh, yes.
They had some amazing,
fantastic.
My favorite one that was posted, if you go back and you look in the top comments, you'll find it. It was one of the top rated comments in the subreddit. And so if you haven't been to r/Shitty Daystrom Institute, it's one of it's a subreddit for really bad fan theories, like deliberately stupid fan theories about Star Trek. And so one of my favorite ones this year was by a user called Trevor McLamppost, and his theory was that the Vulcan salute is actually their symbol for scissors, and that the traditional Vulcan greeting is, so the way they greet each other is actually just an impromptu rock paper scissors game.
Yes,
it's become a total norm in society to do scissors so that nobody gets embarrassed.
There's a surprisingly large number of shitty fan theories that revolve around sex and Star Trek. That's all I'm saying. Surprising high percentage of them.
That's true. There's one about Riker not wanting to stay on the Enterprise because he's got all his holodeck porn.
That one was recent, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was
within like last month. Yeah, that one was great.
There's some really good, there's really good content in that subreddit, and it's been sort of growing and staying. It's pretty active. If I highly recommend you go there and you have a browse through and post your own. There's some really funny stuff there.
I like this one in r/Shitty Daystrom for this past year. Voyager was lost, quote unquote lost, for 7 years because it was too awkward to ask Neelix to leave.
Oh boy, it's fantastic. And then there's theory Tuvok is a Vulcan. Just great.
What's up?
Here's he was to say, number one, he acts kind of emotionally cold and logical.
that post, that one pretty much sums up the whole subreddit, I think.
I love it.
Smash, Yaz, Zadok, I want to thank you guys for coming on and talking about Star Trek in 2018 on the Reddit community.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Big J. It's been great.
Absolutely. We hope that you subscribe to our Reddit community and enjoy this podcast so you can see just how rich and unique content created by the greater Star Trek community can be. As Q would say, see you out there.